Ferrari did a great job on Saturday. They had, I think, the fastest car, but they cemented that with some brilliant qualifying tactics as well. Carlos Sainz giving Charles Leclerc the slipstream ensured Leclerc took pole position, and Sainz was consigned to the back of the grid with his power unit change anyway. So they did Saturday very, very well. Leclerc held on in the first stint ahead of some immense pressure from Max Verstappen. Then Verstappen pits. He was just starting to drop back. And again, it looked like Ferrari not only had the pace, but they had the durability of the tyres as well. They had the tyre life to be the favourites in this Grand Prix. They had track position, they had it all. And Charles Leclerc threw it all away in one moment at turn 11. Beausset, really quick right-hander, and Leclerc comes into it and just gets a little bit wide, loses control of the car, spins out of the lead of the race, and hits the wall. Game over for him.
No.
Are you okay?
I cannot go throttle. No!
Now, there's a bit of confusion when Leclerc retired because there was a bit of chatter on the team radio afterwards, and he mentioned that he couldn't get the throttle. And after Austria, there was a question really as to whether he had a problem in Austria where he couldn't come off the throttle fully. There was a problem with the throttle damper. It wasn't the case in France. This was a pure driver error from Charles. And actually the throttle conversation was when he was already in the wall. He couldn't get reversed to get back out and into the race, which possibly he could have done given the damage was square to the front of the car. So that was what consigned Leclerc to retirement. But this mistake then was all on the Monegasque driver at the front. And he just comes into Beausset. He's pushing hard. He's got Max Verstappen pitted on fresh tyres, who has already undercut him effectively. Ferrari are going longer. Charles knows that this is a crucial time in the pit stop window, and he comes into this corner. It's a long one. You take a first apex and then you've got to come back for a second apex, and he's just carried in too much speed here. So he's on the end of this stint on the medium tyres. They're giving up a little bit of grip, and he's just understeering at this point. Can't turn in, running wide, and then he gets onto the dirtier part right on the outside of the track. And then as soon as he's got this level of steering angle on with the car already on the edge and then gets on the dirty part, the rear just absolutely goes and he's in the wall. Big mistake from Charles Leclerc, and a championship rival having a mistake like this is usually very costly. We can see it from the data. Here we go, Leclerc v Leclerc. The blue lap is clearly the one that he crashes in this corner here. And you can see coming into the corner, he's just carrying a lot more speed. He's coming in a little bit quicker on this lap. This is Leclerc on the crash lap versus Leclerc on the lap before, where Verstappen was in the pits as well. So he's not under pressure from Verstappen on either lap here. And he just comes in a little bit quicker. That's the speed trace. And then as we go through, the brake traces, he actually hits the brakes at a similar time, maybe even fractionally earlier here. But it's just way softer on the brake pedal initially, so he's not slowing the car down nearly so much. And as he comes through into the corner, the steering trace is almost identical. He's just waiting, but then he's carrying that little bit more speed in. It makes him run wide, and then he's off onto the dirtier part of the track and into the wall. So Leclerc, from being in a risky but relatively controlled position in the Grand Prix, is out. I think it's the first time a driver has crashed out from the lead of the race in dry conditions since 2005. It hasn't happened, I think, in 17 years when Fernando Alonso clipped a barrier in Montreal. Before then, it was probably about 1999 where a leader in dry conditions has crashed out of the race. We've seen it in the wet more recently with Vettel and Hamilton in Hockenheim. But this was a huge mistake from Leclerc. People don't tend to spin out of the races without having an incident with someone else very often these days at all. And now Charles has done it twice in the first 12 races of the season. So no wonder he was very hard on himself afterwards. He always is, but this one particularly hurt him. And just a case of overdriving, I think. And sometimes he looks so good under pressure. Here, there didn't seem to be an absolute level of pressure because Verstappen was in the pits and slightly moving to a different strategy. But Charles just digging too deep. He seems to have a sort of 100%. And then there's a couple of times he goes over it. So maybe he needs to think about how he drives in the future, because these mistakes are costing him a lot of points right now, and the gap to Max Verstappen in the championship looks pretty unassailable.
It's my fault, and if I keep doing mistakes like this, then I deserve to not win the championship. So the level is very high this year. I'm performing at a high level, but if I keep doing those mistakes, then it's pointless to be at a high level. So yeah, let's see.
But the disaster for Ferrari was not done there. Carlos Sainz brilliant in France, but he was already going to have a tough weekend before he turned up because of what happened in Austria to him, where he had an engine failure. So he had a new power unit, meant he had to start from the back of the grid, and he was actually flying through qualifying as well. He was really quick and had a chance to probably fight for pole himself, but he helped his teammate out, charged through in the first part of the race, and the safety car came at a really bad time for him. So he had to pit for his medium tyres, and then they had a long way to go to the end of the race. To make it worse, he had this pit stop as well. Tyres go on. Long delay now whilst the tyres are on, but no one wants to release him. Then he gets released straight into the path of Alex Albon here, and the Williams has to literally lock up to avoid hitting the Ferrari. It's the definition of an unsafe release. And just look here as well, how close Sainz is to hitting those airlines of the McLaren. Very close as he comes out. And if Albon hadn't been able to lock up there and slow down enough, they might have been tipped into a spin, and all those McLaren mechanics are out there ready for their driver. It's a slam dunk, unsafe release. And Carlos knew it as well. And I think this one for Ferrari just comes from the slow stop initially. So they all changed the tyres here. The left rear is the last one to be changed. And it goes on, and now they're ready to go. But the front jack is swiveled out the way, and the rear jack just stays planted. And the rear jack man now is having a look around, and he's thinking, oh, everything looks okay, so I'll release. He drops the jack. Carlos feels it in the car that he's just suddenly been dropped. He dumps the clutch, and away they go. And there's just basically lack of care for Alex Albon coming through in the Williams. And when there's a safety car out, it's always going to be a really busy pit lane. So it's a slam dunk, and Carlos knew it. You can see it on board with him here. He waits, he has first gear ready, now he goes, and look at his reaction there. He's checking the mirror, and then he knows, bam, that's going to be a penalty for me coming up. And sure enough, it was. But even then, he was having a good race, and still the Ferrari woes didn't end. This is a good bit of racing, fundamentally, between Sainz and Perez, and this finally got Carlos Sainz up into the top threes, attacking Perez through Scene Corner. And this was a really sketchy one. Perez on the limited defence here, running wide, and I thought there was going to be some front wing contact, but there wasn't quite through that corner. But the attack continues. Sainz putting Perez under huge pressure. You can see here, he's got so much more grip in the tyres than Sergio Perez. His medium's still working. Perez starting to struggle at this stage, and Carlos can really position his car where he wants, and Checo is struggling a lot. This defence for me was on the absolute limit from Checo. Carlos goes to the inside. It's a small movement, and then it's a reactionary movement from Checo in defence. Because it was one movement, there was no weaving as such, but it was just a little bit reactionary, and Carlos has to back out of it for a moment. But he makes it work here with a really nice move around the outside, and for a moment, Checo looks like he's having to fight the switchback, but then Carlos just sends it in the final corner, and even better for him, there's a DRS on the exit that he's about to pick up as well. So it's a good move from Carlos Sainz, and at this point you think, okay, the medium tyres are working well for him. At first it looked like he was going to have to take another pit stop, but actually 10 laps to go, he's just taken third place on track. The medium tyres clearly giving a lot more grip than the hards. Overtaking wasn't that easy in France, and Carlos yet managed to do it through a sequence of corners, showing he had good grip from the tyres. So why would you pit him? Is the question. And it was the question that he was asking as well. Not only that, but the team told him to pit when he was millimetres from the back of Perez's car as well. You don't need that when you're in wheel-to-wheel fighting. So it was a lack of awareness, I think, from the Ferrari pit wall there. The timing of the calls to Carlos, and fundamentally, the call was bad as well.
Box, Carlos, box, speed confirmed.
Not now, not now, not now.
Why were they telling him to pit right then? Were they not watching the action?
The worry with Ferrari here is that they think that they did the right thing in terms of the strategy, where it makes no sense what they did. They pitted Carlos into the longest pit stop loss of the whole season. It's 27 seconds, plus he had a 5-second penalty coming as well. So you're looking at 32 to 33 seconds time loss, which he was never going to make up in 10 laps. So already they're basically giving up when he's just got the track position over Sergio Perez. Now, if they'd have pitted him way before, he probably still wouldn't have made it, but it would have made a little bit more sense. But as he's just got the track position, you think, keep him there and see if he can build up the gap, which it looked like he had really good tyre life over Perez. Yes, the mediums in theory should have been worse, but he was keeping them in very well, and Checo was struggling. So there was a chance that he could have made up those 5 seconds to Perez and then Russell behind and stayed on the podium. And whilst Ferrari say the tyres weren't going to last, Pierre Gasly did exactly the same on his mediums. Gasly was also fighting further back in the field, and he had zero degradation towards the end of the race as well. Zero signs of drop-off. In fact, Gasly on his mediums, without pitting to the end of the race, managed to charge right up to the back of the Aston Martin fight for a final point. So his mediums managed to stay. Maybe the Ferrari mediums wouldn't have done, but it was worth a try just for a few more laps to see, because fundamentally they had nothing to lose. Pitting was cautious, and they could have just opted for a pit stop in 5th place in 5 or 6 lap time if there was signs of degradation. So it made no sense for Ferrari to pit once Carlos had pulled off this move, but they did, and that consigned him to 5th place in the Grand Prix. Pretty frustrated after the call in the Grand Prix, but obviously towing the party line afterwards, saying that he understands why they did it. I don't quite.
Obviously, inside the car, I have a feeling they have a lot more numbers, a lot more data on the cards to take the right decision. I'm sure they did the best they could. Obviously, in the car, you're willing to take more risks and try to get to the end for the podium, but you never know.
That was a look at Ferrari's wretched Sunday at Paul Ricard, but there was loads of other action through the Grand Prix as well. For more on George Russell v Sergio Perez, the fight for the final podium place, and loads of incident through the Grand Prix as well, check it out on F1 TV.